Fresh and Buds.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you guys are all my buds, and I'm joined by a bud today. Oh my God, Dennis, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your channel name.
Well, my channel name is Kugane, basically the Japanese way of pronouncing it. It's an old Japanese word.
Yeah, I thought it was Kugane, and then I was like, I made a mental note here. I was like, oh, double check.
I don't care anymore. I've been called Kugane, I've been called Kugani and all this kind of stuff. So whatever you want to call me, go ahead. It's fine.
Yeah, I first heard about you from our mutual content creator friend Capolo, and he had always referred to you as Kugane. So
Capolo's a great guy.
He really is, and we're actually, as this episode comes out, we will all probably be together in New Jersey, my home state, my home area. Are you pumped for your travels to New Jersey?
Oh, definitely. It's my first time in the US. I've never been there. So it's like double exciting for me. On the one side, I'm going to be participating in that ProTour. And on the other hand, I'm going to see all these people that I've met online and played with online, done all these collaborations with. So it's very almost dreamlike, I would say.
Yeah.
that this is suddenly a thing now.
I will say that, the first couple tournaments where I ran into people I met online, because I had never really been, someone that knew people online before I got into the Flesh and Blood community. And when you meet people that you've met online for the first time, the adrenaline is crazy. You get so amped because you're like, oh, I've been chatting with this person forever, and now they're right here in the Flesh and Blood, hey. Just like
I had that in the beginning, but not anymore nowadays. Like I got a couple of very great friends that I met over in some MMORPGs back in the day, like Final Fantasy XI and World of Warcraft. And I've seen those people in real life, and then at first it's like super nervous because you're so used to listening to people's voice, but then seeing them in real life, it's just it almost feels alien, like it feels unreal. But I think I got used to it now. Like it doesn't really shock me or shake me as much as it used to. So that's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you're gonna have some nerves of steel here at ProTour New Jersey. Pretty exciting.
I'm gonna go into this ProTour. I'm just not gonna care if I win or lose. I'll leave it up to my opponents to be as nervous as they want to be. I'm just I got my ProTour invite, and I'm just here to have like casual fun. Like they can do the professional stuff. I'm just here to have the casual fun relief.
Well. We do want you to win. Bring it home for the buds, as it were. Everybody I've talked to so far that's in the Pro Tour, I'm saying, oh, you got to win it for the buds. So I have 10 favorites right now. So I'm gonna include you in that there, Dennis. But before we get into the show, I want to thank the sponsor of the show, which is my Patreon, the Fresh and Buds Patreon. For anybody who kind of likes what I do, you guys can all check it out. I post some bonus episodes, just usually like 10 minutes of me talking behind some smooth jazz, and you can have some ability to contribute to some content that I make. But yeah, thank you everybody. But we're going to talk to Mr. Dennis here from Kugane Gaming on YouTube. I want to learn a little bit about you, Dennis. How long have you been into trading card games or collectible card games leading up to this point?
Well, it actually started all the way back in my childhood. I think around 9 or 10 years old. Like I used to be a very avid collector of those Panini sticker books when I was a really young kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like you collect stickers, you put them in the book. But then at some point they came out with this Pokemon trading card game, and I was all about Pokemon as a 9-year-old. or 10-year-old, something like that. And I got my first Pokemon cards. But then the LGS that I frequented to, that one had a lot of adult players that were more into Magic the Gathering and stuff like that. So it didn't take long until I was collecting both Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. So I'm 34 now. That's been 25 years since I've started with trading cards. It's been a lifelong hobby, basically.
Yeah, so you were collecting Pokemon and Magic. Were you playing them out the gates, or did that come a little bit later?
Magic was too difficult for me when I was a kid. For some reason, I couldn't really get a grasp of it. I mean, I was 10 years old at the time, and everything was in English, and I'm Dutch, so I couldn't even read the cards. And at the time, the Pokemon cards, they did print them in Dutch, so I was able to play that. I was collecting and playing at the same time. And I was a bit of a completionist at the time, so I really kept on going to those Pokemon leagues that they kept running at the LGS to get like all the promo cards for my collection. And that was a great time. And back then it was promo cards, and now it's the cold force that you just need to have to have. It's like the same feeling, just a bit more mature nowadays.
Yeah. Well, here's the real question: Do you still have any of those old school Pokemon cards? Because
I had to sell them. Like when everyone knows, but now when I had cancer and I lost my job and everything, I was strapped for money, and the Pokemon collection was one of the things that I ended up selling. I sold it for, I think I sold for like $10,000 or so total, which is a huge amount. But if I had kept it until Pokemon Go and stuff had released, that stuff would have been worth close to $500,000. I think I had everything from like the base set complete, everything there meant all the way up to the X Ruby and Sapphire set. So a little bit sour losing all of that. So I don't want to make that mistake again with Flesh and Blood.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame that you had to sell it, but Flesh and Blood is the future. I will continue to say that, and let's hold on to those nice little cold foils. And I don't know.
You don't know what happens, because at the time when I sold Pokemon, the 10,000, it really felt like a lot of money, because it was basically like 9 complete sets or something, and then you get 10K for it. It's like, wow, that's a lot of cash for some childhood memories. But I think something similar could happen with Flesh and Blood. Of course, Flesh and Blood is a bit limited in the sense that it's aimed at only adults, while Pokemon is like good for all ages. So I think in terms of growth and value, that will limit the growth a little bit. Magic the Gathering doesn't really suffer from that as much, simply because it caters to teenagers as well, which Flesh and Blood also doesn't do. But I think for long-term collecting, Flesh and Blood really has everything in the making to be a very good and long-term collectible game, in my opinion. I've seen a lot of games throughout my life. I've collected a lot of games, and Flesh and Blood is the first one that I feel like, okay, this is it.
Yeah, this could be the one. And I mean, I'm not sure we'll get a Flesh and Blood Go, like Pokemon Go, to really kick things off. But so far so good. I think, especially with the ushering of Flesh and Blood 2.0 coming into effect, and the abolishment of Unlimited and stuff like that. I think things are pretty safe for the collectors, and I'm pretty happy with it in terms of my investments. Now, your YouTube journey, which you do make some great content for Flesh and Blood, you do some stuff for other games as well.
Yes.
What sparked your interest in creating content? I know you started with some Magic Arena stuff.
Yeah, I was a competitive Magic Arena player, if you can call it that. I used to grind to Mythic every single month to try and get that top 1200 spot for the invitationals and stuff like that. But one of the things, like, I was really into Magic. I still am. Like, even today, I played a little bit of Magic at my LGS. I still love the game. But I was quite frustrated with the way that the mana system in that game works, as well as the heavy power creep.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, I just needed a bit of a change. So I went from making Magic the Gathering content, I switched over to creating Flesh and Blood content. Flesh and Blood was like the latest TCG that just came out in Europe. I think it got released like 1 year after New Zealand, like the late 2020, I would say. Yeah, I think it was the late 2020 when it came out in Europe, and it was a great shift in general because the game in Flesh and Blood is just so much more consistent in terms of the resource system, and you don't have that super heavy power creep that you see in games like Magic the Gathering. So I really felt like for the first time since a long time that skill in the game actually mattered. And that really spoke to me, and that's something that I've been missing in a lot of other TCGs like Yu-Gi-Oh! It's kind of luck-based with all the negates and hand traps and stuff like that. Not exactly, you of course need skill to navigate a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck properly, but there's also a lot of luck involved. With Magic, the same thing. If you have too many lands, too few lands, your game is pretty much done, which is something that has happened to me several times, even in big events like the Mythic qualifiers. And that just feels very bad. It feels like everything you've worked towards is just completely undone by luck. While in Flesh and Blood, if you lose, it's usually because you just played poorly, or you brought the wrong deck, or you weren't really up to date, like how the meta looks like, or how certain opponent decks work. And I like that. I really like the knowledge-driven and skill-driven nature of Flesh and Blood in general.
Yeah, that's what has brought a lot of people over to Flesh and Blood. Now, you mentioned power creep in the game that shall not be named, even though I've already said it, Magic. Power creep. Do you think, and you mentioned that there's no power creep really in Flesh and Blood. Now, the argument could be made that, Flesh and Blood's still very, very new. Do you think power creep is going to come for Flesh and Blood, or are we relatively safe to a certain extent?
I think in a way we already reached the point of power creep in Flesh and Blood, which is, of course, I love the game, but it's one of the things that I'm a little bit critical about as of late. Because if you look at things like the current metagame with the decks like Starvo, for example, that can push out such ridiculous combo lines with the dominate and go again and discards on hit and all this kind of stuff that makes it impossible for the opponent to interact with what they're doing. And that's something that you didn't really see back in the Crucible of War era and before. Like, yeah, you still had those decks like Dorinthia that were very punishing. Like, if you didn't block enough, they suddenly ruffle stomp you with like a plus 15 attack reaction. But it always felt in those decks like, yeah, but I could have blocked more, or I could have played differently. I could have played around it. Well, now we're in a situation where you have things like Visceral OTK. Luckily, that one has been nerfed a bit with the recent bans. Starvo, Prism that just goes white with all the auras and like ridiculous on-hit effects. Chain that can have like 5, 6, 7, 8 card hands every turn. That it's making it harder for a lot of decks to perform that previously were fine, that weren't like top tier decks, but right now can't even win a game anymore. And this is something that I've seen in a lot of my data points as well. Like before the bans, that certain decks are just not doing it anymore. And I do think that LSS in general needs to have a really hard look at the game in its current state and figure out to kind of rewind back to the power level that the game used to be before Crucible of War got released, I think. If they can't do that, then this game is golden.
Yeah, and that's something. And another YouTuber I had on actually made a point. Because we had talked about Starville. I had the Tall Timmy on, who's a pretty funny guy. I love his content. He was on, and I mentioned him. Is LSS pushing these cards too much in these sets? And he did make a point that they're always going to have to push a little bit, right? Now, because people, they want people to buy the product.
I'm not sure if they are intentionally pushing, actually. I think it's more a situation that certain heroes have a much bigger card pool now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we always had powerful cards like E-Strike or Command and Conquer. even things like in Katsu, like a Mugenshi release that can fetch you a card from the deck and then go in for another ton of damage. We always had powerful cards, but we've reached a point that things like Guardian, they have such a big card pool, and especially things like Starvoid, they have all the elemental stuff, all the Guardian stuff, on top of all generic stuff, that I feel those decks have so much stuff available to it that they can just what do they call, like in Magic, that they call it like a good stuff deck, where you just take all the best things from every single type and just jam it in the deck and just run it. So you have these decks with like Crippling Crush ×3, Oakenol ×3. Everything can be fused rather consistently. That's something that other decks just don't have. And I feel for Flesh and Blood that will be hard to balance, because the card pool is going to grow for all the heroes. Like at some point, everybody has like a super consistent version of the hero. But then the question is, like, do we want the game to be at the power level where it is at right now? Or do we want to have the power level like it was like maybe 3 sets ago?
And how do you think they would scale that back to that, like, around Crucible era?
Well, one of the ways that we've seen them scale it back is by introducing things like elements, so that if they introduce a new hero, they kind of need to lean towards that certain element that matches with the class or hero, like the light element or shadow, lightning, ice, etc. But I think they need to really go away from the whole free value model, because if you look at things like Viserai that can get a free rune chant of every single activation, people will find ways to break that. If you have a free +2 and dominate and go again in case of Starvo, people will find ways to break that as well. Back in Blitz, back in the Crucible of War era, you had Ira being like a top tier deck. Why? Because it has free value from that +1 attack. And I think that it's okay to do something like you need to discard a card and draw a card, for example, or give a defense reaction or something built into your hero. But the moment they start giving all this free value stuff, like you get extra attack, extra go against, like in Briar with all the go against shenanigans that they had, or Plunder Run giving a free card draw if something hits, that's where things seem to go sour, where people seem to find loopholes to manipulate the rules in such a way to kind of outplay other decks and make something that is supposed to be an interactive game into a non-game almost. So they really need to tone down the free value, I think. If they can do that, then we should be okay going forward.
Yeah. And, you know, if you look back over the past year at the decks that were kind of becoming problems, right? They all had these hero abilities that kind of rewarded you for doing something you wanted to do anyway, right? I mean, the Briar was the one that really stood out to me. You know, you get the embodiment of Earth just for attacking or hitting. Like, well, that's the point of the game. You got to hit them to kill them, you know? So like, that's what I want to do anyway. So you're just giving me all this free stuff. So, and I guess maybe something that could be discussed is, well, if you're going to make heroes like that, we have to make their card pool a lot weaker, though that becomes a much bigger challenge, I think.
Yeah, and it does look like LSS is not really willing to do like a hero-specific ban list. It's like either nobody has it or everyone has it, like Autumn's Touch. Autumn's Touch is a very important card in Earthbriar, for example. And they can't have it anymore. It was an important card in All Team who wasn't really doing much to the meta, and All Team cannot use it anymore, which is a bit of a shame in my opinion, because a lot of heroes that were already kind of underperforming, well, All Team is not underperforming in my opinion, but Briar kind of is, they get punished now because some other deck needs to have their card pool limited.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's the right way to go. So I don't know how they can limit it further. Like they do it with like the light, shadow, ice elements and stuff like that to kind of force the hero to go a certain path. But players are going to be players, and no matter how much they test the designs, there's always going to be somebody that will figure out some kind of a combo line that breaks the game. So
yeah. The nice thing about Flesh and Blood is there's no online client per se. That it isn't as accelerated as some other games, but these pros are grinding pretty hard, and they find it. As a matter of fact, I don't know how much truth there is to this. I don't know if it's a meme or not, but I could see it being true. Tarek Patel, the U.S. national winner, posted on Twitter today. He's messing around with Knick-Knack Bric-a-Brac in the list that he's bringing to the Pro Tour. So
okay, then maybe.
Yeah, so maybe, and he's like, if they're breaking a card like that, they are really putting in the work, which is interesting. Now, that brings up something I did want to talk about with you. Kind of looking at stats and stuff like that, because to me, you're somewhat of a stat master, especially during the Blitz season, the ProQuest season. You compiled a lot of different data that you gathered and presented in a really excellent way, if I may say, and you're excellent with it, as opposed to guys like me. I'm a dreamer. I'm like, well, Levi's the best, and that's just the truth. That's my truth. I'm gonna live it. But I do enjoy looking at, I guess, a realistic view from you. Do you have a background in statistics and data?
I do, kind of, because I'm a biomedical engineer as my job before I got into all the content creation stuff. And I'm not great at statistics necessarily, but I feel when it comes to gathering this data, it basically boils down to getting enough data points and just calculating the average. So, and I feel as long as you have enough data points, you don't even need to statistically validate it that much. Like if you have 500 data points, it's valid. You don't need to think about it too much. But I do have a background in that, and in the lab, when we came up with a new method and we want to test, for example, if we wanted to test a method to detect liver cancer, we had to develop the whole method, and then once it's working, we had to test it like 500, 1,000, sometimes 10,000 times on different samples just to see if it can consistently detect that certain kind of liver cancer. And I feel the same goes for Flesh and Blood. The only issue with Flesh and Blood is there are a lot of biases when you get the data sets, because first of all, there's not that much data available. Secondly, you have these representation biases, like if everybody plays a certain deck, that's going to pull the win rate of a deck down because of mirror matches. You have a lot of players that are not really skilled at the game that are pulling win rates down, so the most popular decks tend to have a higher win rate than the unpopular ones, like Azalea right now in my data list has a 20% win rate, which it shouldn't be so, because I've seen some Azalea mains do amazing stuff with the deck. Definitely not a 20% win rate deck, but yet in the data it shows like that. So I do think there are a lot of issues to get a proper data set together in this game that I don't really know how to account for at times. But I just try my best by just including as many data points as possible and trying to focus on like these bigger events like callings, ProQuests, ProTours that's coming up, to get a bit of a realistic view of how a hero is performing. Is it winning? Is it not winning? And it's been working all right, but it's a lot of work to put in all the data, because everything you receive, you need to put it in manually into like an Excel sheet. So
yeah, and now obviously LSS is looking at data when it comes to their bans and stuff like that. Do you think there's anything that they could share with you that would help kind of fill in some certain gaps, some weaknesses in data that you can gather currently?
Oh, definitely. Like, for example, when they have like a professional level event, they put in the heroes into the software. So what they can very easily do is like export the win versus loss ratio for per hero. Like if I had something like that I can just see like, okay, this hero has played X amount of games and they won this amount of games, they lost this amount of games. You can see the win rate rather easily, which is something that I've been trying to do by contacting shops if they can send me the I think it's called a CSV file from the event, so I can very easily be like, okay, this player played Briar, for example. They won this many games, they lost this many games. I put it into the data set. But if I had a way to really automate a lot of that process, that would be a huge help in general. But I don't know if it's in their best interest to share that with me, to be honest, because their company, I think to some extent, they don't want certain data to be too publicly available.
Mm-hmm.
And
That makes sense.
Because the thing is, like, when you have very good data sets, it also is very good at pointing out the flaws of your game design. And I think as a company, you want to show your game in the most positive light as possible. You don't really want to be too focused on, we are doing all these great things, but also all these bad things over here, like we're doing this wrong, this wrong. You don't really want that. So I don't think it's in their best interest. And I think that's also why when you look at their reports on their website, they only look at like top 8 performance. And you see very little information like how did the hero do overall. So I don't know. I think there's a lot that they could do to share stuff with us, but I think a lot of that stuff is also stuff that they are not willing to do.
Yeah, that's true, and I think that they allude to some data, right, in the ban announcement that they announced early, thanks to you, I think, and which we'll talk about that in a bit, but they alluded to some data that they saw on Viscerai and their reasoning for Bloodsheath Skeleton getting the hammer there, which kind of at least confirms for the people out there, and they're like, what? Well, Viscerai's not winning. Why is it getting a ban? But like they had some data to kind of support that ban. But yeah, I understand them not really wanting to share any kind of accurate data for people because the weak points would be not
on
great.
the other hand, I think they mentioned about Viscerai that overall the hero doesn't seem to be winning all that much, but they feel they need to take action anyways. But in my data set, I had 416 data points for Viscerai, and it only had a 52.4% win rate. This is like before the bans and everything. So I also noticed that Viscerai is doing very well in the meta, but for some reason the overall win rate wasn't all that great for that hero. And I think they probably saw that too because they have the data of like all these events. Like I only have the data from the events from tournament organizers that are willing to share it with me. So I think they saw, but at the same time, they probably had the same dilemma as me when I was doing my data research that I see like, how come does this hero perform so badly but keeps on showing up in top 8? Like, what's that all about? And then you start to wonder, is it because of over-representation, which is kind of the case for Viscerai. There's almost as many Viscerai players as there are Starfall players, at least in the meta from like a month ago. So does that mean they are over-banning? Are they banning too little? I don't know. But what I do know is that the games that Viscerai does win with the whole Skeleta crack play Sonata for X a million, that's just not fun to play against. And maybe that's also part of the reason why they did end up deciding to get rid of the Skeleta, because it's just, I feel like people are playing Viscerai in a way that it was not intended to be played. I think the intended design for that hero is more like a mid-rangey build, not to keep stacking all your rune charms for like one big turn.
Yeah. I mean that could be it, and we may never know what LSS was thinking when they banned Skeleton, but so sorry to the Viscerai players out there. But I want to get to a new segment. Not a new segment. I've been doing it for a little bit now, but it's called the Fresh Faves. Before we get into the rest of the conversation, just to get a little bit of a feel for who you are as a player and a fan of Flesh and Blood. So I'm going to ask you some favorites of yours. You ready?
Sure, go ahead.
First, we're going to do favorite hero.
Well, straight off the bat, Katsu. It's a ninja hero. I love studying historical ninjutsu and historical Japanese warfare. So anything that has that Japanese vibe to it in a medieval setting, it's kind of my thing. I do feel in terms of ninja, they really went the whole Hollywood ninja kung fu thing that I'm not really a huge fan of. But then we've seen art like what was it called, 100 Fists, 100 Wins, the one from Everfest. And then that artwork, whoever I forgot the artist's name. I'm very sorry, but the artwork on that card really depicts like how ninjas used to look like historically. So I feel they are moving more to like the real historical setting. So I just love the ninja class in general.
Yeah. Are you excited for the new Draconic Ninja in Uprising?
Of course, it's finally a ninja, right? New ninja card, new ninja support. I do hope they get rid of the whole combo system because I feel requiring the right cards to do certain combos can be quite limiting. So I would prefer if the heroes were a little bit weaker overall, but just more consistent in the damage output. But let's see. I'm gonna be playing that hero for several months after it's released anyway. So regardless if it's good or bad, I don't care.
I am
I'll be
hoping
playing
that
that day and night.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they explore some new design space with the ninja kind of theme. So, I mean, it's due time for it. So, next we have his favorite weapon.
Favorite weapon? I guess I'm just gonna say Edge of Autumn. It's not a good weapon, but it looks great. I wish I had a call for a version of it.
You like it better than the Kodachis?
Art-wise, yes. And also from a historical setting, like Kodachis weren't really used in combat all that much. I would love if Ninja could get something like a spear. Spears were used far more frequently on the battlefield than swords in general. But I guess for now the Edge of Autumn is definitely my favorite weapon in Flesh and Blood at this point of time. And then I do like things like Voltaire as well from the new set Shiver.
Oh,
the Ranger weapons, they are also very beautiful. I really like those as well.
Yeah, do we have a spear in Flesh and Blood yet? I don't think we do.
I don't think we do, but Uprising could have one. I've seen quite a lot of spears in the artwork, so maybe we're gonna have one now. I mean, it would make sense. I'm just not sure if they will give it to Ninja per se. Like from a historical perspective, it would make sense, but from a fancy perspective, I don't think fancy ninjas they are depicted with spears all that much. Like you see it a little bit in things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where they have like the staff and such, but that's about it, I would say. So I think they're gonna stick with the whole Kodachi katanas and maybe like a Sire too, and that's probably gonna be their team for a very long time. But maybe Spear would fit for something like Warrior, if they are gonna have a Warrior, even like a generic weapon.
Yeah, we will see. I think a spear would be pretty neat. That's probably high on the list. We haven't gotten a dagger, right, or a spear, so some weapons like that. Now, what is your favorite equipment?
Well, Mars of Momentum, of course.
It's becoming very predictable here, Dennis.
Like this segment is like super predictable for everyone. Like anyone that has even watched like two videos of mine probably knows it already. But even when I was grinding to the 1000 XP in my country, like the one golden foil that I really wanted was the Mars of Momentum. So after I reached 1000, I started to spam Twitter because I know some of the employees of LSS do follow my content over on Twitter. So I just kept on putting messages like, "Oh, it would be great if I got the Mars of Momentum." Wink, wink. But they ended up sending it to me. I ended up getting it, and I don't know if it was by accident because nobody ever confirmed anything, but I have a feeling that they did see my tweets and that they do know my whole ninja weebery in general, and I think they probably sent it because of that. But I was super happy getting that card. It's a very thick top loader. It has a bit of damage, unfortunately, has a big dent at the side.
Oh no!
But I'm not planning to ever sell it anyway, so it just makes it more unique, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great keepsake, and honestly, sentimental value is always, I think, better in the long run. Now, what is your favorite non-hero, non-weapon, non-equipment card? So your run-of-the-mill instance, non-attack actions, attack actions.
What is something I automatically put in every deck? I almost want to say Command and Conquer. Like, first of all, it has great artwork, but also the whole flavor behind it that they need to block with 2 cards or you get rid of the arsenal. It feels very punishing. So I really like that card in general. The Fiendel Spring Tunic is great, but that's also equipment, so that doesn't count. It's a generic, but still equipment. Yeah, I think Command and Conquer is definitely one of my favorite cards in Flesh and Blood in general.
Yeah, I mean that's a great answer. I mean, I always play it because I play Leviah and 6s are at a premium, but I think I'd be playing it in most decks anyway as well.
I just feel I like the flexibility of it. Like it can break phantasms against Prism. It is a very solid attack if you play it. It's punishing if the opponent doesn't block it. So it has that all-round value, but at the same time, because it's a 6 attack, it's still fair because they can just block with 2 cards and stop the whole thing. Of course, not in decks like Ira. Ira pushes it over the top by giving it that +1. But in general, in CC, where you don't have that automatic +1, it feels like a very fair card. And I remember all the way back in the day, and this is like almost a year ago when I started creating content, there was a lot of negativity from the community around Command and Conquer being too strong and it automatically wins you games, etc. But now we're seeing so many lists that don't even run it anymore because it's a very cool tech card, but not really necessary to run it, which is something I'm a huge fan of. I like to have powerful cards, but not if it's a card that you have to run no matter what. And that's something that Command and Conquer starts to fill more and more. It's still an expensive card, of course, which may be another reason why people don't run it. But most decks don't really need it per se.
I wonder if the prevalence of Crown of Seeds is a reason less people are playing it, at least main board. You know, it always feels bad throwing that CNC across the table and they just tuck that.
Yeah, but we've had that
arsenal
all the time, no? Like we also had things like people putting a Sigil of Solace into the arsenal and then
True.
playing it when you play the Command and Conquer. So I kind of like that there is some counterplay in that sense. But the Crown of Seeds is definitely a reason why a lot of people don't run it in the main board anymore. But then there are also so many heroes that you would think it's great to bring it. Like against Lexi, for example. I thought the best card ever against Lexi, but she has so many taxing effects with Frostbite, making you discard, etc., that sometimes it becomes very hard to play something like a Command and Conquer against a deck like Lexi, because if you play Ninja, for example, you Kodachi for 1, that's going to cost you 2 because of channel like Frigid or a Frostbite, and then you need to pay an extra card in order to play the Command and Conquer because it costs 2. It just feels very punishing. So I just think in the current meta game, the card is just not as good as it used to be, but it still has so much flexibility, in my opinion, and it's great against a lot of decks. It's great at stopping phantasms, like I said. So I think it's just a very well-rounded card, and I think that's the power level that I hope all Flesh and Blood will be balanced around.
One can hope, Dennis. But now I want to talk a little bit. We're going to jump into kind of, because when this comes out, it'll be Thursday. The calm before the storm, the ProTour storm here. But I want to talk a little bit about the community and your experiences with the community. Since you've created content for other games, how would you compare the community and audience of Flesh and Blood to other games you've created content for?
Well, most games, they have a rather toxic community, if I can call it that. Especially, maybe not in real life, but especially online. And sometimes even at LGSs, I guess. But from what I noticed in Flesh and Blood, you have this really warm and open-hearted community in general. But one thing I did notice as of late, though, and this is something from the last 4 months or so, that seems like the toxicity, and this is something that is in pretty much every competitive game out there, is starting to slowly drip into the game. So I do feel as a community, we really need to really make a stance against that kind of behavior and really stop people from cultivating that, because once it becomes like a main thing in Flesh and Blood, it's there to stay. Like you see it in games like Magic, you see it in games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon is an extremely toxic community. So I kind of want to nurture that whole loving, open-minded, respectful attitude that we've had with Flesh and Blood for like the first 2 years, and go back to that. Like people need to stop with the negativity. It's not good for anyone, not even for them themselves. It just raises their blood pressure, heart disease. It's not good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, Dennis, and and all the listeners out there. I hope you guys are continuing to be a bud. It's the whole point of this podcast.
Be kind to others, like Louis likes to say. Is that what he says? Like, be kind to the people around you.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's that sentiment in any way or form that you can throw it out there, I am 100% behind it, because in the end, we are just playing a game, and we're all very passionate about it, and it's important to keep that passion in check and use it for good rather than evil. But
I think another reason why some people get toxic is when there is a lot of how to say, like, insecurity, especially when you're in a format where certain decks are unbalanced, a lot of emotions go free. You have people like Rudy of Elf Investment that is purposely trying to get people angry about the game to try and evoke that emotion. I get from a marketing perspective, it's great to get people emotional and angry over the game because it helps to push sales. But from a community perspective, we don't want that. We want kind people, respectful people, loving people, and but it's maybe only like 10% of the community at this point. So if we really work together and we really try to stop that kind of behavior, we don't cultivate it, then we can probably stay that nice, warm community for a very long time.
And that's the goal here. That is the goal. And you know what? I think marketing and sales can be, nothing makes me want to buy a box of Flesh and Blood more than just being happy about the game. So I think that should be the strategy going forward. But that's great. That's great that you feel that way, and I think everybody feels that way as well for the most part about Flesh and Blood. And I understand toxicity can sneak in there, but I'm hoping that we kind of keep it locked up.
On the other side of things, we have a lot of amazing people. Seriously, a lot of amazing people. Like, especially within the content creator sphere, like the Tall Timmy, for example, Melody Likes, that's now creating content and very active on Twitter as well. We have people like Flugenbox, also a very nice person, Capolo. We have so many, you yourself, so many great people in the community that are actively creating content. And I wouldn't say that, at least within the creator sphere, I can't really think of anyone that I feel like, okay, that person doesn't belong here, or that person is nasty or whatever. So
yeah,
I think we're going in a very good direction in general. And I do think that creators in general have a lot of power in deciding what kind of an attitude the player base and community has in general towards the game. So, I mean,
absolutely.
Let's keep it up.
Yeah, we just got to keep it going. But, it's nice. I've felt pretty welcomed by everybody in the community, both on the content side and the kind of content, I guess, what would you call them? Content eaters? I don't know. Content consumers.
Consumers, I guess, yeah.
I'm thinking about food.
Well, like, when I was making content for Magic Arena, I make content for a good year or so. I uploaded videos every single day for like half a year. And I think after all of that, I had like maybe 4 or 5 patrons, and that was it. But now with Flesh and Blood, there's so many people that are so kind to I know that for many people it's not that much. Like it's just like $1 or $2 that they donate each month. Some people a bit more, but that kind of kindness is something that I don't see from my Yu-Gi-Oh viewers, for example. There's only maybe like 1 or 2 patrons that come from my Yu-Gi-Oh videos. I only have like 2 or 3 patrons that come from my Magic Arena days. And so I feel in general from the Flesh and Blood community, they really care about the well-being of others, and it shines through with like these little donations and stuff like that as well. I know it's money, and ultimately money is useless, but I do think it shows. I think we have some very great people, some very kind people in the community,
Absolutely.
and even in such a small sample size with only a couple of thousand subs, you can already see the difference compared to other communities. And I feel keep it up, seriously.
Yeah, and it might not feel like much, but it is something. So, those $1 or $2, it could be a lot, a lot of some people's pockets, and it's very kind that anybody does that. So, and we as content creators are very grateful. But you did get to participate in a different kind of content that is different from your YouTube. You got to be behind the booth at the Calling Krakow.
Yeah, wow. That was quite something.
Tell us.
You have no idea how busy that is. Like it's constant work. You don't get time to have lunch. You start recording and it's done when it's done, kind of feeling. You have a short 5-minute break between games, and that's about it. But it was an amazing experience, not necessarily for the commentating itself, but also meeting the community. I had a bunch of people coming up to say hi, people that normally watch my content. And a lot of people coming to the stream just to try and have a peek what I actually look like, because normally I don't reveal my face on my channel. So that was kind of fun. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it was interesting because it was just you and Steel Fur, right?
Yeah.
For both
great
days.
guy, by the way, Steel Fur. Everyone should go subscribe to him. It's really a great person.
Absolutely, and I hope is he coming to New Jersey? Do you know? If
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think yes.
So it should be exciting.
He got I think he bought a invite, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, nice.
So, or maybe he earned it, one of the two. But he is coming to Jersey to play in the Pro Tour as well. So we probably get to meet him there as well. And whoever is there, go see him. He's a really kind person.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be a lot of great people there, him included. Now, so if you mentioned that you don't get a lot of breaks. It was because it was just the two of you, as opposed to, in these American callings we've had, it's usually like a team of 3, so they can kind of switch people out, which is fun. But so did they just reached out to you guys? How far in advance?
They reached out to us all the way back in October, I would say, for the calling in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And at the time, I had already bought my ticket to go play myself, but I'm more of a blitz person than a constructed person. So when they asked me, like, hey, do you want to commentate? I was thinking, like, okay, it's constructed anyway, so who cares, right? I play blitz. So I agreed with it. And then after that, it was quite a stressful period for them, I think, because I didn't hear back from them for quite some time. Like they would get back to me with the contract, but that never happened. And then all the way until the calling got cancelled, then they contacted me like, the thing is cancelled. They will try to find a new day to host it. Then a few months later, I think around February, I got another email like, okay, it's now rescheduled for Poland. I was also allowed to do an announcement about that. And if I'm still interested to do the commentating, and this time it was going to be a blitz calling. So it was a very tough choice. Like, do I go play the format I enjoy, or do I do the commentating? But then I thought to myself, like, if they get any random person commentating, and I know Steelfur knows his stuff, I knew Steelfur was gonna come for sure. But you don't know if they're gonna have somebody that actually knows the format. So I felt that this was just better for the community if I go and commentate. Plus, it has a lot of exposure to potential new viewers. So I went with the commentating side of things, anyways. And after that, I didn't hear from them until like 1 week before the calling, I think.
Yeah,
So,
and it had to have been a great experience too, just to get behind the booth and see what it's like.
yeah, but it was strange for me because normally when I do my content, I don't have a webcam. I can't afford one. So I'm not really used to being in front of a camera. So that was something I really had to get used to, like that I need to look at the camera. Like when I did the interviews, it didn't even occur to me that I was holding the microphone with the wrong arm and stuff like that. So those are all things that I really learned a lot from, and if I ever get to do it again in the future, I will definitely be able to do a better job. But it was a very nice experience. It was very cool to be able to work with an entire team that is setting up the stream, preparing everything, all that kind of stuff. You have judges on site. If there are questions, you can leave the booth to go ask. It was just a very pleasant experience in general, albeit a bit hectic, like I said.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and hopefully you can get behind the booth again, maybe for a CC tournament instead of Blitz. But speaking of tournaments, Dennis, we have the PT this weekend coming up. What are your thoughts on the competitive scene leading into this first Pro Tour? And I mean, obviously the big thing right now is we're in a post-ban world. How do you feel about those bans and how it's going to affect the meta?
Well, the Skeleta ban already took the whole uninteractive side away for Viscerai. That's a good thing in general. I feel for Starfall, the bans didn't do all that much. Like, not having Awakening is, of course, a big nerf to the deck. But in many scenarios, the deck wasn't really falling behind on life anyways, and Awakening was kind of a dead card in the deck regardless, because they can really push the pain constantly if they go the aggro plan. So I feel for Starvo, the fatigue plan has really been significantly nerfed now that they have mostly 2 blocks in the deck. But on the other hand, they can just go full on aggro, and that's something that I've seen the past few weeks while I was practicing for the PT. Starvo is still a very, very good deck, and I honestly think that there's a very high chance that it will end up winning this PT. So I think in terms of like meta variety, it's gonna be roughly the same of what it used to be. The only difference that we might see is that because of the bans, that people feel uncomfortable playing a nerfed deck. Like for example, Briar was fine after the bans, but a lot of people left that deck anyways. Chain was fine after the bans, but lots of people also abandoned that deck, even though it was still a very solid deck. So maybe we will see something similar for Star, but a lot of people don't play that, and the Prison players are kind of in a bad spot because their easy bully target is gone. And what will happen with the meta then? I don't know. Maybe Chain can make it to the top, or maybe a Viscerai player can still struggle their way to the top if there's not that many Starvo players.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, the meta will be the same, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out because, you know, a lot of people are talking about, you know, exactly what you're saying. The Starvo is still strong. And my thoughts on that ban was LSS looked at Starvo and they were like, well, we have to do something, but we also want Starvo to still hit Living Legend. So we can't do too much, right? I think this is their way of being like, well, we can make him weaker, but we also need to fix this problem in the long term because, you know, as we add more cards to the game,
not only that, there was also no correct way of banning anything. Like, what are they going to ban? Like, if they ban some elemental cards like we've seen now, then people just replace the elemental cards with some other ones. If they ban Crippling Crush, that's really unfair to the other Bravo deck, so they cannot do that. If they errata something like Okanol to be like an all-team specialization, like people said, then they make Shiana overpowered in the Blitz format because she can suddenly use that because it's a specialization now. if they ban the Crown of Seeds, then it's a massive field bet for whoever has a Crown of Seeds. So that's not really an option either. So I feel like in case of Starvo, they're in a complete checkmate position. And then they can opt for like, okay, let's errata Starvo itself, but then it's again a field bet. Like people already had the errata for Briar recently, and then another card is being errata. So I don't think they were able to do anything in this regard. Like they just need to let the thing run its natural course and just forget about it. I guess it's sad, but there's nothing in that deck that you can hit that really nerfs it well. Like Awakening was one of the cards that I originally thought, like, if they get rid of that, then Starvo should be kind of nerfed enough to not perform that well, but that wasn't the time when people were still blocking a bit and losing some life. The Awakening was really good. Like they would go to 20 life and just have a massive Awakening turn with a Pulverize or a Crippling Crush. But that's not the case anymore. Like a lot of Starvo players were not even running Awakening anymore at that point when the ban came out. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is interesting. And Starvo will have 2 chances this weekend with the Calling and the Pro Tour to hit that Living Legend. And I'm sure even with the Pro Quest coming up, he will hit it. Now, I
believe right now it's like 16 points away from hitting the Living Legend. So
yeah, because it won Pittsburgh, which is just it was just so close. But now I know we don't really have any stats on what the meta will be like for this weekend outside of what the pros have been talking about and testing. But I thought it might be good to just kind of go through the heroes real quick and kind of theory craft where each hero will be compared to the pre-ban meta. So kind of like we just talked about Starvo, we think still probably top of the food chain, right?
Well, we have like 30 to 40% Starvo representation. I think there's definitely going to be a chunk of players that's like, okay, that's it, I'm out. That suddenly sell out of the hero because they're afraid that the legendaries drop in value. So I do think in case of Starvo, we're probably going to see some reduction. Maybe that now it's going to be 20% of the meta, or maybe even 15%. But I do think things like Prism will still be at that 20 to 30% it used to be. Was it 20%? Maybe it was 15%. I don't recall completely. Viserai, I think a lot of people will probably abandon, even though from the testing that I've done with Viserai, it's still a very solid deck, and it's one of the most resource efficient decks out there that can put out the most damage compared to other decks. But I do think a lot of players, they were kind of camping on that OTK plan. They don't really want to learn the whole mid-range Viserai playstyle. So I think Viserai will be one of the decks that is heavily abandoned. Chain, surprisingly enough, Chain is a very good deck, but it does have its share of weaknesses. Like it cannot really do well against decks that try to fatigue it, for example.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, because I was saying I will play Chain at the Pro Tour, and because of all my data gathering, a lot of people thought that I have some information that they don't. So I keep getting these questions like, why are you bringing Chain? Like, it does have a good matchup against Starvo? Does it have a good matchup against them? Like, that's a good matchup against Prism, and that's basically about it. So, but I just like to play the hero and no other reason. But
I don't know, Dennis. I think there's a lot of people on Chain. I think
there are now, because they are now speculating like there's some hidden secret to Chain that nobody knows about, but the deck still dies to any type of control. Like the damage just isn't there if the opponent just keeps on blocking every single thing you do. But I mean, we'll see. I think Chain will definitely there will be at least 1 or 2 of them in the top 8, I guess, because the deck has a very good matchup against pretty much anything that's not Starvo.
Yeah, and so those are probably all the top dogs from the last meta. Now I'm going to go through a couple of these other heroes that were always on the brink. One I want to mention is Reinhardt. I always felt like Reinhardt could always spike every once in a while at some of these tournaments. How do you feel about Reinhardt in this new meta.
Reinhardt is funny. I don't remember where it was, but I believe LSS they released some little schematic where they showed like the difficulty of each hero, and they put Reinhardt as like easy to navigate and luck based.
I don't know about that.
And I actually think Reinhardt is like one of the more complicated heroes to play because every single thing you do, you need to really calculate. Okay, I played this, then I need to pitch this. I have this left in my hand. Then I can discard that and then potentially draw into that in order to do this. Like it has all these intricate combo lines to be able to push the maximum amount of damage. But
yeah, I wouldn't say easy. Easy is not the word I would use for Reinhardt.
But yeah, like Reinhardt is one of those decks. If it's in the hand of a very good player, they can go very far with it. We've seen that in France. I believe it was a ProQuest that Reinhardt made it all the way to the top. We've seen it go like second place in other places as well. So it definitely has the potential to make it very far in these events. But then on the other hand, the events where it did perform well, there were also a lot of casual players involved. So
yeah,
and the question is like, did Reinhardt win because they had a lot of good matchups against weaker or not weaker, like less skilled players, or because the deck is really good? And at the same time, like, does the deck lose so much because it's run by so many less skilled players, or is the deck actually weak? I do think there's potential for Reinhardt. Like, it's a very spiky deck. Like, in that regard, I guess LSS is a little bit correct that there's some element of luck involved with Reinhardt, and if they do get lucky, they can do a lot of damage in a very short time span and take over the entire game. But I don't think it will make it to the top in the Pro Tour. And I think the people that do go to the Pro Tour, I don't think anyone. Maybe there's like one or two Rhinos that have been playing it since the very beginning, but I doubt anyone consciously is making the decision. You know what would really counter the meta? Rhino. I don't think anyone is doing that.
Yeah. I mean, unless there's some team out there that really discovered something. Another deck is Briar, which is always kind of on the cusp there. We saw some top 8 performances, but nothing stellar after Starvo came out. How do you feel about Briar in this new meta?
Briar is a very solid deck, but it's too dependent on having the Channel Mount Heroic in hand to make a meaningful turn at this point of time. Which is one of the reasons why its win rate right now is rather on the low side. But we've seen it spike a lot of events where all the stars aligned and they did get all their good hands. I did see some lists with like Redliner Briar also still... Some Redliner Briars that were also performing really well in the current metagame, but that's if they don't have any opposition with like a Lexi player on all team plunking a channel like Frigidon, because if they face that kind of decks, then they can't win.
Yeah, and that brings up the next one, Oldham, and I guess Lexi. How do you feel those ice-focused, frostbitey heroes are going to look?
Oldham's win rate is surprisingly good to me from what I've seen. Like, I keep seeing Oldham having like 60% higher win rates in both Blitz and CC. And it's like, this is being navigated by skilled players and against skilled players. So I think Oldham is definitely one of those heroes that are underexplored. But of course, Starvo is just a better version of Oldham, I would say. Like, the Oldham specializations are not all that important, and Starvo has all of that, and then some more with the crippling crushes and stuff like that. So even though Oldham is a very good hero, I think Starvo is just the better pick in general because there's many more tools available to it at this point of time.
Yeah, and if you have the legendaries for Starvo, you have it, or if you have it for Oldham, you have it for Starvo as well. So you might as well just sleeve up that Starvo. Now, I've seen some murmurs about Bolton Sabres kind of getting back into the mix. How do you feel about that?
Bolton Sabres definitely has a chance, yeah. Under the current circumstances, like under the current meta, it really has a chance. Definitely because now Starvo has to play the aggro game. And because of that, it will have some worse matchups against things like Prism because they cannot really play that control game as much as they used to. So I could definitely see a Bolton go to the top. But yeah, I think so. I think Bolton could definitely make it if they can get like a double Lumina turn on maybe turn 3 or so. They can probably win the game with ease after that, simply because of all that life that they gain back from the Lumina triggers, as well as that massive amount of damage that they can push in such a short period of time. So I could definitely see Bolton going to the top. Like, I actually wonder what happened with the Bolton players. Like, the deck was performing great, and for some reason, people stopped playing it.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why. I guess the discard effects from Starfall were too punishing for the deck because they really want to be able to keep all the Lumina Ascension and stuff like that. But
yeah, that early hand disruption against Starvo, like in the first turn or two, did feel pretty bad for the Bolton players, I felt like. But I think probably still has a good shot. I don't know if people are going to sleeve it up though.
Well, we will probably see that the calling though, like at the Battle Harden and stuff. There will definitely be some Bolton players.
Definitely.
But I think Bolton is still a very good meta pick, especially if we have only 20% or even 15% of the meta being Starvo, then Bolton has a very good shot straight to the top.
Definitely.
Because it has a solid matchup against a lot of decks that normally win everything. Like against Viserai, I would say it has a solid matchup. Like if Bolton can get its combo early, it wins. Against Chain, it does well. Against Prism, it does fairly well as well because of that big combo line. So I could really see a Bolton even making it into the top 8, to be honest.
That would be really cool to see.
Now, if somebody is brave enough to bring it.
Yeah, that's the big caveat, right? What about poor Capolo's dash? I'm personally, I don't know if the bans were enough to put dash back up top. Not up top. I don't think dash was ever up top, but back into the running is, I guess, a better way to put it.
I don't think so. I don't think Dash will make it. I feel the support that Dash has gotten in recent sets has been a bit on the weak side compared to what other heroes got. So I don't think Dash really has the tools required to make it to the top. No. She really need, like, the Tackler Pounder is a great card, by the way, for aggro Dash, but then you run into the issue, same as Chain, like if you're up against a fatigue player that just keeps blocking everything and then taking a little bit of damage every turn, then you run out of a deck very quickly.
Yeah, with all that boosting,
yeah. So I think until Dash has a way to utilize the banish zone, then I don't think she's gonna make it. It's just too punishing, and control Dash doesn't work under the current metagame because the heroes that she could control, I guess against things like Starvo, a control Dash would do well because they can rather consistently stop those big dominate turns with something like unmovables, like we've seen all the way back in the day. So I think against those aggro Starvo players, a Dash player is probably okay if they play a control-ish deck. But there are so many go-wide heroes, and even Viserai now, like a Viserai player can still go for an OTK if the opponent's deck is slow enough, and I feel Control Dash definitely falls in that category of being too slow.
Definitely.
So I don't think Dash can really make it to the top because of that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. Now, the only other hero that I think might have an inkling of a shot is Kano, because it seems that a really good Kano player can just spike a tournament. Do you think we're going to see any Kano players here in the Pro Tour? And if so,
there's going to be a few for sure. There's going to be a few for sure. There has to be. Like even I'm running 3 Arcane Barrier in my sideboard now because I do expect to see some Kano here and there.
Yeah, and
Lexi as well. I think Lexi is a very good Pro Tour pick right now. Especially the lightning build can really push a lot of damage very quickly with 3 of a kind. So I could definitely see a Kano or a Lexi doing very well at the Pro Tour.
Yeah, that would be really cool. It'd be fun to see some kind of underdog hero taking down this Pro Tour, the first Pro Tour. Now, you know who I'm voting for to win is Leviah. And I had Ethan on last week, and he's playing Leviah in the Pro Tour. He's very, very confident about it. and he said that he knows at least one other person is playing Levia in the Pro Tour. So there is at least two in the pool. How do you feel about Levia?
Well, when it comes to aggro decks, Levia is probably the biggest damage dealing one out there, I would say. I think she has the most potential to just deal like 30 to 40 damage in a single turn. So, but historically, she hasn't really been doing that well, has she?
No. Well, you know what? I mean, I'm gonna hope that I love Levia. I love playing Levia. I don't want everybody else playing Levia. I want to be, yeah, because I feel like if she wins, everybody's like, well, we got to hop onto Levia train. Though I don't think that's true. But yeah.
Well, we had like that 1 month after Mana got released that everyone was saying like, Chain is a bad deck. And everyone was losing with Chain, and then suddenly out of nowhere, nobody saw this coming. Everyone discovered that Seeds of Agony is good.
Yeah, so good.
So, I mean, maybe Levia is one of those sleeper heroes that nobody has really discovered. I tried to make a good Levia deck, and I couldn't do it. There's just so many factors that make it hard to navigate Levia properly.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have enough resources in your graveyard. Okay, so you need to have stuff that can block. Then all the good cards, they don't have a block value, so you need to run worse cards just to have the ability to block. And then you run into issues like if you go to like 10 life as a Levia player, the one turn where you need to block with your full hand, you die to your Blood Depth.
Yep, yeah.
So there's just so many punishing factors for all Levia player. They need to really just put the pain like straight away, start pushing damage like crazy, and have an opponent against them that somehow doesn't block. Because if you have an opponent that is blocking and chipping away damage here and there, pushing you to that 10 life mark, then you're just in a huge huge pile of trouble as a Levia player, I would say.
Yeah, it is a sad life, but I still have hope. I think the optimal build is out there, and we will find it. Damn it! And then the last three heroes that really just aren't really on many people's radars, unfortunately. The original Bravo, Azalea, and your boy Katsu. Well, actually, Katsu might be on some people's radar right now.
I nearly brought Katsu myself, to be honest, but he just cannot really win consistently against things like Chain.
Mm-hmm.
And he really struggles against Starvo. And especially against Alt Team, he cannot win at all. So it's very hard for Katsu. Like, you do see Katsu players spiking their way to the top 8 quite frequently, but you very rarely see them going to like top 4, like top 2 even. And I don't think that's gonna change. I think Katsu's damage output is just not enough for it to be a top tier hero.
Yeah.
And I hope that Uprising will fix that, give us a bit more power for the deck itself. Or alternatively, that all the other aggro decks get tuned down a little bit more, so that decks like Katsu, Dash, and all these other heroes become a bit more viable.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel for decks like Katsu, they really need to jump through a lot of hoops in order to have a good turn. While other heroes, they don't really need to do that. They can just plunk whatever's in the hand and still have a decent turn. So I feel it's very, how to say?
Yeah.
You're really limiting yourself by playing Katsu because it's just not consistent enough in the current pace of the metagame.
Yeah. It is tough though. Some people were excited after the ban, but it's just it might take a little bit more to get Katsu back up there. And then
Azalea, on the other hand, it's a sleeper hero.
Yeah, you think Azalea is a sleeper hero? You heard it here first, folks.
I got a friend over in Belgium. He is a tournament organizer at a shop called Brood and Spel near Antwerpen and St. Nicholas. And he is in Azalea main. And when you see that guy play with that deck, you're wondering, like, are we still looking at the same hero here? Or what's going on? Like, like some people, they are playing this deck at such a high level that I still feel it's underexplored. I've been saying that in a lot of my meta analysis in the past. Like right now, it's in a bit of a bad spot because there's a bad matchup against things like Prism, which there are a lot of in the current metagame.
Mm-hmm.
It also does a bit poorly against Staff, I would say. But Azalea has so many punishing effects that can really shut a lot of heroes down, like Chain not being able to create Soul Shackles, Viscerai not getting that free Rune Chant engine, against Lexinet not being able to flip the card in the arsenal to create Frostbite is very punishing.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think all we need is like one really good Azalea player to spike in some big event, and then everybody will suddenly realize that, okay, this deck might be better than we thought. I think there's definitely potential for Azalea, even if the data doesn't back it up at all. I mean, in my latest set, it's like a 20% win rate deck, but I think a huge reason is that there's just not that many good players navigating the deck.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I hope you're right, and I think a lot of people will be happy to hear that. And maybe ProTour New Jersey's the one to do it. But and then I guess the last one's OG Bravo. I don't think there's much to say about OG Bravo. It's like if you're gonna play Bravo, it seems like Starvo's the way to go, right?
I think so. It's just a worse version of Starvo, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Like not having access to Oakenold is just damaging. But on the other hand, like Bravo, the OG Bravo does have a much easier time to getting that dominate damage in.
True.
But then you don't have the +2 that Starvo offers, so yeah.
And the go again.
And the go again, and the free 500 draws, and I'm not sure. Like all the effects on Starvo, right?
Yeah.
You get draws, you get go again, dominate, your opponent automatically loses.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. With Starvo. Oh my god. But yeah, that's kind of our preview for the Pro Tour. Before we go, do you have any Uprising hot takes that we have coming up? Is it going to change anything? I mean, Icelander coming to CC is probably be pretty big.
One of the hot takes is from a friend of mine called Gerard. And he told me that because we keep seeing everywhere that Uprising will have 3 heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that's correct. It's going to have 3 heroes, but it will also have 3 villains.
Oh, I did see you post that on Twitter.
Yeah. And I feel there might be some truth in that. Like, what's the point of them writing the hero keyword on the cards? Mm-hmm. If there's only heroes, why put hero then? You know, there has to be a reason for that keyword to be there in the first place, and maybe we're gonna see some villains for once. But then I do question, like, why are heroes like Chain not a villain in the first place?
But Leviathan, Chain, Viscerai, I guess too.
Heroes, there's Levi and Chain. They are the good guys. They are very nice to everyone. They did a lot of blood rituals, but it's fine.
Well, that would be a really interesting turn of events for Uprising, but we will see if they reveal anything else. And by the time this episode comes out, they might have already revealed something. So
I think that's real. Like they already showed us 3 heroes now. I feel if there's nothing else in the set, then it just feels too early in LSS standards.
Mm-hmm.
So I still feel it's going to be a very big reveal that all of a sudden it's like, haha, you have 3 heroes, but there's more.
There's more. Well, the Pro Tour is going to be the place to do it. So should be an exciting weekend. Dennis, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me.
You're welcome. I had a great time.
Yeah, it was a good pleasure. Always fun to chat some fab. I want you to please plug all of your things, and so people can find you, and yeah.
Well, everyone can find me over on YouTube, youtube.com/Kugane Gaming. I think if you type in Kugane Gaming in the YouTube search bar, my YouTube channel should pop up straight away. And as far as other social media, you can also find me at Twitter, same handle, Kugane Gaming. Patreon, also /Kugane Gaming. It's all the same handle, so wherever you want to reach me, be it Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, you can all find me under that single line at the end of the HTML. Is that what they call it?
Yeah, and all that information is going to be down in the show notes for everybody to find you, and everybody can find me still on YouTube, Fresh and Buds, and on Twitter at FreshBudsPod. You can email the show, freshbudspod@gmail.com. Join the Discord, the Buds. We have fun over there. That's all in the link tree. And Dennis, whenever I end the show, I like to talk a little bit about food, and you said you're from Belgium. Do you have any Belgian food you'd like to talk about?
Well, we have this great thing called Belgian Fries. Have you have you heard of that? It's like French fries but bigger.
It's just like bigger French fries.
It's like a bigger French fries, like a Belgian French. It's
I get it.
But yeah, I think as far as Belgian food goes, I'm a bit of a cultural barbarian. I want to say, like, I don't really know all that much about my own culture. I think because I can't really think of like a traditional Belgian dish that I feel like okay that's very typical for Belgium, other than fries. Like wherever you go here, there's kebab stores and there's fry stores, and that's about it. So,
well, there's to my knowledge, you guys have some good chocolate over there and amazing beer, I would say.
Oh, definitely. I'm not a drinker myself, so I wouldn't know, and I don't really eat chocolate, so.
Oh, okay. Well.
So it's I'm missing out on the best parts of my culture here, I feel. But,
that's all right. That is okay. Well, the fries sound amazing, and you know, as is tradition on my show, I talk about food at the end of the show, and then I'm really hungry for dinner, and I think that's what I'm going to do next. And yeah, well,
do you know what you're going to eat today?
I probably chicken. I don't know what kind yet, but chicken of sorts. We will find out after I log off here. But yeah, Dennis, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice meal later, and see you in New Jersey.
Yeah, everybody have a great week.